Hi, I'm Dawn with Drucker Diagnostics, and today we're going to spin our first samples in the Horizon 24. Your first spin in the Horizon 24. Your Horizon 24 is set up, and now we're ready for our first spin. Before we can spin a cycle, we need to make sure that the centrifuge is correctly loaded. That means the samples it will spin are balanced. Like any centrifuge, the Horizon 24 should always be run with a balanced load. That helps keep the lab safe and ensures the maximum lifespan for your centrifuge. First, make sure that all 6 tube holders are properly seated in the Horizon 24 rotor. They do not snap in place, but should be seated 1 per slot in the rotor. Next, we need to balance the tubes around our centrifuge rotor. Balancing happens in 2 different dimensions. The tube holders must be balanced around the rotor, and the tubes need to be balanced within each tube holder. Let's start by balancing around the rotor, and then adjust placement within each tube holder as needed. To be balanced around the rotor, each tube holder must hold a tube or tubes of the equivalent size and volume as the tube or tubes loaded in the holder across from it. So if I've got 4 10 ml tubes over here, I need 4 10 ml tubes over here as well. If you've got an uneven number of tubes, don't worry. We'll explain what to do about that in the next step. With this tube loading guidance in mind, start distributing your tubes into the tube holders. You can use 2, 3, 4, or 6 tube holders, depending on how many tubes you are spinning. Just remember to make sure that the tube holders are carrying equivalent weights. Once you've got that equivalent loading, follow the diagram on your screen to balance the equally weighted tube holders around the rotor. Red indicates an equivalently filled tube holder. Now, what happens if you're running different tube sizes, say 4 ml and 10 ml volume tubes? You can absolutely run them in the same spin. Just make sure to follow the equivalent size and fill volume rule. If you've got 2 4 ml and 2 10 ml in one tube holder, you'll need 2 4 ml and 2 10 ml in the other matching tube holder. Alternatively, you could load these tubes into 4 tube holders instead of 2. For that, you'd place 2 4 ml across from the other 2 4 ml and 2 10 ml across from the other 2 10 ml. Once you've got your tube holders placed, it's time to balance the tubes within these holders. For this part, you'll want to think of each tube holder and the one across the rotor from it as a pair. If you've got 3 tube holders loaded, we'll talk about that in a minute. So this tube holder pairs up with this one across from it, and this one with that, and so on. The tube loading within this pair must be balanced. If you have 1, 2, or 3 tubes loaded, refer to the diagram on your screen for the appropriate loading. If you've got 4 tubes loaded, you're all set. If you've got 3 tube holders in place, you'll need to either have 2 tubes or 4 tubes in each. There's no way to get symmetry with 1 tube or 3 tubes. You can redistribute your tubes into a 4th bucket, or you can use a counterbalance tube, or 2 or 3, to hit that 2 or 4 per bucket fill. If you don't have enough tubes to balance your centrifuge, you'll need to create a stand-in to fill the gap. We call this a counterbalance tube. This should be an identical tube filled with an equivalent volume of water as the blood tube or tubes that it will match. If the volumes are equivalent, the weights should be too, and you'll get the balance you want. Use your filled counterbalance like a regular tube to get your balance. With your tube holders in place and your samples loaded and balanced, you're ready to spin. With the lid open, use the Stop Unlock button to select your cycle. In our case, we're going to run cycle 1. This cycle has a factory default of 10 minutes at 3,300 RPM, which is 1,800 xg. The other default presets are listed on your screen now for easy reference. Keep in mind, these can be customized to your lab's preferred spins if desired, but this is what will be programmed into the Horizon 24 when it arrives from the factory. With your desired cycle selected, close the lid. Secure the lid latch by pressing it down gently and turning it a quarter turn clockwise. Press the start button. The centrifuge will automatically lock and the rotor will begin to spin, accelerating until it reaches the cycle's programmed RPM. It will then run for the cycle's programmed time. Once the run is complete, the centrifuge will begin to slow down, applying the rotor brake. When the rotor is fully stopped, the centrifuge will beep and the lid lights will flash to let you know it's done. The centrifuge will automatically unlock. Turn the lid latch a quarter turn counterclockwise and then lift the lid to retrieve your spun samples. If you have any other questions about your Horizon 24, you can always contact Drucker Diagnostics and we'll be happy to help. Thanks for watching and have a great day.